Can you guys all hear me? Great. Thanks so much for having me today. I am really excited to share some of the things I'm going to talk about today. But before I jump in, I want to ask if you'll raise your hand if you're excited for the changes you think are coming to digital marketing in the next year. We got a couple people? All right, that's good. I'm hoping that all the rest of you will be excited by the end of my session as well. So there's this really interesting theory that Salim Ismail has put forward about exponential growth, where he says it takes about 40 years for growth really to take off. And maybe a new technology comes out and people get excited about it in the moment, but since it doesn't immediately change the way our world works, we kind of forget about it and think, oh, I guess it's not going to change anything. And then it ends up taking everyone by surprise when it really does hit that inflection point. And I really think that we're at that inflection point now where we're about to be taken by surprise, but hopefully if we're paying attention to what's going on, we won't be taken by surprise. So I'll talk about 2 of the trends that I'm seeing and 5 things that you can do to really take advantage of these disruptions rather than having it derail you. So the first trend is really about the convergence of direct response and brand advertising and the convergence of online and offline advertising. So on one hand, we have Google. So in 2006, then CEO of Google said that brand advertising is the last bastion of unaccountable spending in corporate America. Bold statement for Google to make, but they've long positioned themselves as the antithesis to brand advertising, right? You should be on Google because you can measure everything and it's great. But Google has really benefited from the fact that last click attribution is the easiest attribution model. If you all Google 3Q Digital after this session, I'm not going to be like, thanks, Google, you did such a good job of convincing this person to visit my website, right? There's so much else that went into that. And then on the other side of things, raise your hand if you remember the Old Spice commercial, The Man Your Man Could Smell Like, right? Pretty much everyone remembers this commercial. It played a lot. It was very memorable. They've kind of rebooted a newer version recently. So we can say, wow, that was great brand advertising. We all remember it. That's all we're looking for in brand, right? But if you actually look at the data, this campaign had 0 impact on their market share. The category grew 8% over this time period, but they actually had 3 competitors that gained market share while they didn't. So was this successful? I don't think so. So when we look at the 2 sides of this argument, brand and direct response, you can think of it like the rap battle of the 90s, where you've got East Coast brands who really tend to spend a lot more on branding, they're more conservative with their approach, and then startups on the West Coast have invested a lot more in digital marketing channels, in direct response. And there's really this clash between the 2 of them, where we've got one half focused on getting customers to know them. That's kind of the end KPI. And then on direct response, actually getting them to act and act quickly. But on both sides, advertisers tend to dip their toes, at the very least, into the other tactic when they run out of runway, right? So when direct response advertisers run out of growth in direct response channels, then they're like, oh, I'm gonna buy TV ads now. But they run into issues because they try and hold their TV ad campaigns to the same standards as their search campaigns that they've built everything off of. So this isn't the path to success, and instead of fighting this battle between both sides, we should think of a world in harmony between these 2. And that's Bone Thugs and Harmony, to be precise, which is a Midwest band, okay? And, sorry, not band, rap group, that during this fight between East Coast and West Coast rappers, they recorded a collab with Biggie and a collab with Tupac. And so they were able to play both sides of this battle and not get caught up. So we can do that. We're in Portland, but that doesn't mean that we just need to be West Coast advertisers, right? We can think about all of these things holistically. And this future is what I like to call performance marketing, where everything is performance marketing. We can measure everything that we're doing. That doesn't mean we're necessarily using the exact same KPIs, but ultimately, we want everything to be building towards our ultimate business goals. Are we looking for growth, new customer acquisition, whatever it is? All of our advertising should be working towards those goals. And we see this in how the platforms are developing their new ad units as well. So YouTube, maybe it's a digital channel, but it's really been seen more as a branding opportunity. But they've worked really hard to develop new ad units that are bringing more opportunities to advertisers to really get at direct response. So we did a test with our client CuriosityStream. This is a video streaming service. They had a huge spend on YouTube already, and this new ad unit, TrueView for Action, came out. And so all we did was swap in this new ad unit, and we saw 89% more signups and a 12% lower CPA. So this impact that the ad unit has can really change things, and we're not just seeing YouTube just as a branding channel. It can be for direct response as well. And we see this from the other side as well. So TV, traditionally seen as an offline channel that's best used for branding, but we're seeing the way that we can buy TV changing. So there's going to be an 89% increase in spend on TV in 2019. At the same time, we're thinking that YouTube is this digital channel, but 14% of our impressions today are showing on CTV, and that's expected to increase. So we can't think about these channels as holistically different. If you're on YouTube, you need to be thinking about these different ways, because that's just video, and it's just a way of reaching people when they're being entertained. The last example I'll talk about for this convergence is billboards. So out of home could not be more traditional, right? But more and more of these displays can be bought programmatically. And not only be bought programmatically, but be updated in real time. So this is an example from British Airways where they updated the messaging with information about the flight that was flying over at that time. So really cool, really interesting, actually draws your attention, right? So all in all, this is all coming together that, sure, we're search marketers, but we can't ignore what's going on here, that everything is converging into this single performance marketing. The second trend that we're seeing is that artificial intelligence is making individual channels simpler to manage. Really, they can manage themselves to a certain extent. But also due to this first trend, we're seeing more channels available, and so there's more complexity for us to manage as marketers. This is a picture from the Robot Museum in Japan, just to illustrate that it's getting harder and harder to tell the difference between a robot on one side and a human on the other side. And AI is really all around us. Anytime that Lyft adjusts the fare to equalize the number of drivers and riders, or Amazon recommends a product to you based on what's already in your cart, that's all AI that's so integrated into your life, you're not even really thinking about it. And this is just a list of some of the ways that Google is incorporating machine learning into their consumer-facing products. So this isn't even on the advertising side, but how Google is really trying to make our lives easier through better and better artificial intelligence. And on the advertising side, it's really killing it too. So Google's smart bidding outperforms humans, and it outperforms humans for two reasons. One, it is able to make decisions and actions faster and more frequently than we can as humans. So there's no gap between when you learn something and when you can act on it. And the second reason it outperforms humans is Google's actually withholding information from us on the front end. So things like operating system or language are things that we can't bid on, but Google's back-end platform can. And I would argue that this is actually a win for us as advertisers, because we don't need to waste money on platforms like Marin and Kenshu because there's declining value there. And we don't need to waste time trying to develop our own algorithmic approaches to bidding, right? These tools already exist for us, and we should use them. The downside is that all of this advancement in automation has really leveled the playing field, right, between you and your competitors. So what you do to your account structure, what you pick for keywords, what you put in for ad copy, all of this has a smaller and smaller impact on your results. And that means that you need to be much more strategic. So the channels are managing themselves, and there's also way more channels accessible to you. You can't just be thinking about Google and Facebook as a direct response advertisers. That's just the easiest place to go, right? There are all of these other channels for you to buy from, and to buy from programmatically and still to measure. So those are the big trends. Maybe you're a little fearful right now, but really there's a lot that we can do to make this work for us as marketers. So the first thing that I recommend to you all is to test emerging channels. We can say that this is a search conference, but ultimately we lump a lot of things in with that. Aaron and I were just talking about this, that we say GDN and YouTube are kind of search too, right? But so that convergence continues there, and you shouldn't just think about the products that are easily accessible to you through Google and Facebook, and think where else you can test. So when you build that testing plan, you want to identify viable channels for you and your brands and prioritize based on what you know. Where are your customers spending time? That's going to totally vary based on each individual advertiser out there. So I can't tell you which channel you should expand to first. And when you build that plan and really allocate a unique budget here, you need to make sure that you give it enough. You have to give it enough time that you're able to close the loop and see what the difference in customer lifetime value is, the difference in revenue that you're gaining and margins, all of those things. You need to give it enough time for you to actually be able to make initial optimizations. The performance you see in the first 2 to 3 days that you launch a new campaign is not reflective of what you're going to see in the long term. And you also need to give enough budget for you to try more than one approach, right? Like, okay, maybe the first week didn't go so well, maybe your structure wasn't right, maybe you need to try different ad copy. You've got to give it that chance before you give up on the channel completely. And lastly, most importantly, with having a unique test budget, is to make sure you actually give it enough budget. If you have a $100 CPA and you do a $1,000 test budget on a new channel, that's not going to cut it. That's 10 conversions in a perfect, ideal scenario, but you're not going to get that same CPA. The second recommendation I have for you is that you measure everything, right? Everything is performance marketing. That means we're going to measure every single channel and tactic that we invest in. And I'm going to give you 3 ways to try and up-level your measurement. So the first one is to do a PSA lift test. So you can do this if you're on the GDN. You can do it on any other network that you would like to, where you withhold a percentage of impressions and show either a public service announcement or just don't show an ad at all, so that you can evaluate the incremental value of someone seeing your ad. Really great tactic if you want to measure the incremental value of your remarketing ads, for example, because a percentage of those people that you showed an ad to would have converted anyway. They just needed a little bit of time. The second example that you can really use to up-level things is match market test. So in this, we use statistical analysis to evaluate different markets for your business that perform similarly. So we can create pairs of markets. And then we split those pairs into test and control and implement a new tactic in the test group. So maybe we want to implement TV ads in our test campaigns, or maybe we want to test if our brand search campaigns are actually driving incremental value. And then we can analyze that data afterwards. This is a good option if you're driving about 300 conversions or more per month. And then kind of the ultimate solution, if you really want to get beyond last click and really understand the incremental value of every touch point on every individual user, you can do that algorithmically with a multi-touch attribution partner. So we use Visual IQ at 3Q. We recommend them, but there are a number of other vendors. This is really the best way to look at the entire marketing picture, all of the touch points that you're investing in, to make sure you understand the best way to invest each ad dollar that you've got and continue to reallocate that budget based on what it's actually contributing to your bottom line. This works if you've got 1,000 conversions or more per month. That's just required so you've got enough data for the algorithm to, have any findings. Maybe you're saying, this is too expensive, I'm not going to invest in measurement, but the reality is brands that invest in measurement perform better. This is a study that Forbes did last year where brands that invested more in modeling, benchmarks, and things like that had 5% better return on their marketing investment and had 7% higher levels of growth. And they were able to achieve this by investing 10% of their budget in non-working places like modeling, measurement, planning, right? I'm guessing that most of you spend 0% of your budget on measurement, so it just gives you an idea of what you can strive for. There's nothing wrong with free tools like Google Analytics. At the very least, if you're still not going to spend anything in measurement, make sure you're using a single point of truth for all of your channels. So don't go adding your Facebook numbers with your Google numbers, with your Bing numbers. That's bad math, and you're going to be double counting. So Google Analytics works fine for this. Just really think about what attribution model you use within Google Analytics. Just because last-click attribution is kind of the built-in standard doesn't mean that's what's right for your brand or what you should be using. And you consider things like seasonality and latency to figure out what the right attribution model within Google Analytics is for you. Bottom line, I'm just encouraging you to really up-level what you're doing for measurement. My third recommendation is that you really embrace automation. So right now, about a third of the work that we do day to day is really boring. It's data collection and processing. This is trained monkey stuff, right? We don't want to be doing it, but it's required for us to get to the cool strategic part of our jobs. So we can imagine this future where the machine is in control of the calculation, the execution, and the enablement, and then we as humans can set the goals and think about insights and really get creative. And we can be unlocked for that and free to think at a higher level when all of that rote work gets taken care of and gets taken care of quickly. So I want to give you a couple of examples of how we have built AI to help free up our time. So one example, we use bots to track our competitors' email campaigns. So we can see what their nurture campaigns look like. So we can see if there's some adjustments we should make to our own nurture campaigns. How many touch points are they making? In what time period? And what are their messaging? We can collect all of that through a bot. The second example that I'll give you is we actually take the output from our multi-touch attribution vendor, VisualIQ, and we build a prediction engine on top of that. So then if a CMO comes to us and says, hey, I've got $50,000 in incremental budget, how should I spend it? Well, I can give them an informed recommendation based on their actual performance data that will tell them really what's going to be the best value for that incremental budget. And really, I want you to not be scared of the term AI. AI could be anything from Google ad scripts that you write, or you don't even have to write them yourselves, just Google them and copy them into your account, or it can be advanced machine learning algorithms. And Google actually does have free tools on this. There is their machine learning crash course available for free that you or your developers could dig into and see if there are ways that you could apply this within your own accounts. My fourth recommendation is that you really deeply understand your customers. We look at this through our growth engine where we're understanding who our customers are, what their motivations are, where they are in the customer decision cycle, and then ultimately what is the industry kind of framework we're existing within. We'll break this down because this is very easy for you to do as well. So who are your customers? What demographic information do you have available now that you can use to inform your targeting and to inform your messaging? You can get this from Google Analytics. Maybe you have surveys you've done. At the end of this, I provide a couple of free or cheap tools that you can use for this as well. You can up-level that by incorporating a DMP, where you can marry in data from other sources to really enrich that and find different segments of your customers. What's even more fun, I think, and I think doesn't get done enough, is to understand your customers' motivations. What do they want and why do they want it? Why might they be interested in buying your product? And one tool I really like for this is the Value Proposition Canvas by Strategizer. You can buy this in a book, you can find some free versions online, but basically this helps you map out the jobs, pains, and gains that your customer faces on a day-to-day basis and helps you think about how your products and services either create gains or relieve pains for your customer. Basically, it just helps you think about how you should be stating your value proposition in your advertising. The last thing in this model I'll talk about is you really should incorporate what you understand about the customer and their place in the journey. So do you need to interest them? Have they never heard you before? Or are they already a customer and you're just trying to get them to buy again? You want to make sure that you're targeting those people differently and giving them a different message. All well and good in theory, but I want to show you an example of how we've done this for a client called Rilo. So this is an action camera, and when they first launched, they really didn't know who their customer was, because in theory, anyone could want a cool camera, right? It could be someone walking their dog on the beach, like the example here. It could be someone skiing down a mountain. It could be a YouTuber, right? And so we started with initial audience testing on Facebook to really figure out who is interested in this product. And we actually found that early tech adopters, not the right audience, but people interested in action sports and mountain biking in particular were really into this camera and buying it at a much higher rate than other audiences. And so what we did is build a campaign specifically around that audience, around the X Games, targeting mountain bikers, and creating copy specific to that audience. And this ad had click-through rate that was 3 times higher than anything else that we had achieved in their prospecting campaigns. And it helped us grow conversions 20%. So this is just like one small piece of the process, right? This is an ongoing process of understanding different customer segments and learning how to speak to them. The last thing that you should do is get creative. While AI is changing so much for us in this industry, I don't think that AI is going to be taking over for ad copy or ad creative anytime soon. And this is a good place to really invest your time and energy to make sure that you've got really cool creative that stands out. My first piece of advice here is that you design for the platform and the ad unit. So these are examples of good Pinterest ads because they are designed for the platform. We're not just repurposing our Facebook ad, we're not repurposing our product images from our PDP. And you're able to figure out what's a good ad for any channel really by looking at the organic landscape. So what does Pinterest look like to an organic user? What are they using Pinterest for so that I stand out in the right way and blend in the right way? Because you don't want to be so out of place that they completely discard and don't pay attention to your ad. And last thing on creative, I would say, is you're going to incorporate an understanding of the platform and the ad units. Make sure you're following best practices and incorporate what you know about your customers. But you should also be testing conceptually. And I don't want to really talk about ad testing because I think probably most of you are too focused on ad testing. I think that there's just some things you can't really test into. Really creative ideas are not achieved through A/B testing. And so instead of getting iterative, think about being creative with what you know. And a good example I can give you, last year I heard a talk from a woman who worked at Gas Buddy. And they ran a really cool campaign called The Best Fill Up. And they found a guy named Philip who filled up his gas tank, right? Like you can't A/B test to that ad, to that combination of words. That's not going to make sense. So all in all, right, this is where we stand. Marketing upheaval is coming. All of these channels are converging. All of these different tactics are converging. AI is really changing everything. Each channel becomes simpler. And so for us as marketers, especially as search marketers, we really need to take advantage of all of this and think strategically about how we can make sense of this complex new scenario. So to do that, make sure you're setting aside budget to test new channels. Don't just get hyper-focused on Facebook and on Google because you never know what might happen to one of those Goliaths, right? You might get hit with a Google SEO penalty. Facebook might deprecate the targeting method that you've been reliant on for the last 6 months. You have to have this diversification in place so that you can pivot as you need to. And then secondly, make sure you're upping your measurement game. When everything is performance marketing, we're testing all these new channels, we have to actually know how we're evaluating if they're successful or not. And the third thing, build your own AI or use all of the existing AI tools out there. Whatever you can do to really free up your time and think more strategically, the better. It's really worth the investment. And with that additional time, I really recommend investing in 2 areas. 1, really deepening your understanding of your customer, and 2, getting much more creative with any ads that you're creating. So I've got a big checklist for you. This covers everything that we talked about today. It has a few bonus specific recommendations, but you can use this to hold yourself accountable when you go back to the office and it's like, I don't know, I think those ideas seemed good, but I don't know what I should do from here. Really just think about this list and use it to think about what's going to be valuable for you. So overall, right, I'm asking you to really embrace this exponential change that's coming and think about how it can drive value for you. If you thought this was interesting at all, I have a white paper that goes a lot more in depth on this topic that you can download. Connect with me on LinkedIn or follow me on Twitter, but I'll let Aaron take it from here.